Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week is no different. We are going to dive into Lightroom because, well, to be completely honest with you, because it's very cold outside. It's very cold, it's very dark, it's very wet. Oh, I'm not loving being outside at the moment, taking photos, doing stuff. So we're going to do an editing tutorial. We're going to look at something which actually affects all of us all the time and affects me a lot when it comes to editing my photos, which is, what do you do if the subject of your photo just isn't, it's not popping, it's not drawing the eye, it's not making the viewer focus in on it. There's lots of different reasons that can happen. We're going to take a look at how you can sort that out a couple of different ways. Let's dive in. So let's start with this photo here. Now, I've already actually done an edit to this photo, so I'll show you the before and after. This is where we started with this photo. This is where we got to. So I've just muted the colors down a little bit, focused it in, kind of taken out that green, didn't want that in there. And while the subject is very clear, the squirrel is actually standing in the light, which is super helpful. And part of the reason why I'm showing you this photo, he does kind of blend in quite well with the tree and the background and stuff like that. It's not, he's not popping out of the scene. So we're going to use this as an example. Now, the two different ways really that I think that you can kind of approach this is by looking at the light. You can make your subject the brightest part of the image. You can direct the viewer's eye using the light, or through depth of field, which we now have a very easy way to do that in Lightroom, which is of course lens blur down here on the right. For this image, we're going to use light to direct the viewer's eye. So let's take a look at how exactly we can do that. I'm first of all going to create a virtual copy of this photo. And what we're going to do now is come up to the masking panel. You can see I've already popped one mask on here, which if I turn that off and turn that back on, you can see I've just sort of darkened the outside of the image, almost a little bit of a vignette. Well, we're going to do that, but in a slightly more intense way. This is the first thing that I would do approaching this photo. We're going to go radial gradient, and we're going to pop a nice sort of big oval over our subject here. Just tilt that a little bit, and then I'm going to invert it. I'm going to come over here, invert it. That means that the mask we've created now is everywhere that is red, right? So it's everywhere, and then that circle, that oval we created is now where there will be no mask. And what we can do now is actually bring the exposure down, just really darken essentially the edges of this photo around where our squirrel friend here is. We could go ahead and create another new mask, radial gradient, maybe do a similar sort of thing, nice big oval like this. I've got the feather set, I think, to 100. Yeah, I absolutely do. And we could bring the exposure up a little bit now. And you can see now that's brightening the center of the photo, so where the squirrel is, and darkening around. And now the light is really focusing your attention onto the squirrel, but it still looks quite natural. That's because we feathered those masks and we've done it quite subtly. It's not too intense. Something that I used to do, and something that a lot of people will tell you is a good idea, is go create new mask, select subject. Lightroom will then select the subject. You can see it's done a pretty good job here. It has selected part of the tree. We could clean that up, but then just bring that exposure up. And I have absolutely suggested that in the past. That's something I used to do. But the problem with that is that it's not very natural. It's not very subtle. Now I could brighten it a little bit less, but it does tend to have this effect of almost making it look like you've placed the squirrel here into the scene in Photoshop. It's not blended very well. So I don't tend to do that so much anymore. Let's delete that mask. But if you wanted to do something else here, you want to work with the direction of the light, right? So where is the light coming from in this photo? It's coming from the left. The sunlight's coming in from the left here. So there's a couple of things we can do. We can come in, do a linear gradient. Let's bring that in from the left. And if you then just go ahead and maybe bump up the exposure a little bit, maybe bring down the dehaze, you're going to simulate the effect of sunlight coming in from the left there. If I turn that off and back on, you feel like you've got sunlight coming in from the left. But what that's doing is lighting up the whole of the photo, which maybe isn't what we want it to do. So we can come up to Mask 4, right click, intersect mask with, select subject. And what that's going to do is only apply that linear gradient when it intersects with where the subject is. So if I press O now, you can see that it is now only affecting our subject, but we do have this kind of gradient mask. So it's starting more strongly over on the left and kind of feathering off. And if I actually still move this, look at that. Look at that. We've got this lovely kind of gradient mask that we're still able to affect, but it's much, much more natural the way it falls onto our subject. So we're still brightening the subject relative to the background, but it's much more natural, it's much more subtle. I really like this way of doing things. And if we were to turn off all of these masks, let's go ahead and do that. That's where we started without the mask. So that's just with the global edits. That's the color grading I've done. Let's turn them back on. Let's press O so we're not looking at that. Turn them off again. Let's look at that. And then on. That's really, really focusing the viewer's attention onto our subject there. That's making a big, big difference. Okay, so like I said, one way to do it is through lighting and shaping that light to really focus the viewer's eye to your subject. But there is also depth of field. Now, this is obviously something that's ideal to do in camera, where you have separation between subject and background using either a fast f-stop maybe, so f2.8, or faster than that maybe if you want to. Using a longer focal length is always going to kind of give you that lens compression, blur out the background a little bit. But we can manipulate this a little bit in Lightroom. This works better if you've already done a little bit of this in camera, so you've already got a bit of a blurred background. And I'm going to use this photo. Now, we used this photo when we went through all the new updates to Lightroom, and specifically this actual kind of tool that is now available, which is lens blur. So over on the right hand side in the develop module, we can come down to lens blur, and this is super, super handy. So for example, this photo here, I've already done a decent edit to this, right? So if we see the before, this is what it was like straight out of camera. This is where I've taken it to. So again, we've done a pretty sort of stylistic color grade. I've cropped this down a little bit as well. I might even crop a little bit more, something like that, so that I get a little bit of a tighter feel to the image. And we've popped some masks on. Now, we've actually done a similar thing to what we were just talking about with lighting to direct the viewer's eye to our subject here. So let's just turn these masks off and then back on. So what I've really done there is accentuated and worked with the light that's coming from the left with these windows to just brighten that. And really, if you see without and then with, to really accentuate the light onto our subject and try to draw the viewer's eye in. But what if we want to do this a little bit further and separate him further from the background? Well, we can do that with lens blur. So if we come down here, it's really clever how this works. All we have to do to get started is tick this little tick box here, apply. And what Lightroom's going to do is work out a depth map of the whole image, which is really cool. It's going to work out kind of how the image is put together with that depth. It's putting that together for us here, working out where the subject is, and then it's going to apply a little bit of blur naturally to the background. Now, if you want a full breakdown of exactly how this tool is working, I'll pop a link in the description to the video all about this tool, because it is really interesting and we go really quite in depth about it. We're not going to go as in depth in this video because really it's just we're going to use this tool to make this effect. But if I immediately turn this off and then back on, look how much difference that's making immediately with that background. It's just blurring it a little bit more. Now, of course, we can up that blur amount all the way up to 100% if we really want to blur things out. But I think for this, probably 50 works about right. So let's keep that at 50. And again, turn that off, turn that back on. That is looking fantastic. I don't think I need to do anything more to that image to take this any further. Lightroom's worked out the depth really well, basically ideally and perfectly. You can see the background is really nicely blurred, and then moving up this way it's coming less and less and less blurred until our subject is nice and in focus. We could try the same technique on this photo. This is going to be possibly a little bit more tricky. We've got a little bit of a blurred background here, but maybe it's a bit too messy. Maybe we want to blur it out a little bit more. Let's go ahead and click apply. Lightroom's going to work it out, work out the depth map, and then immediately, look at that. Look at that, it's done such a good job immediately. So if I turn that off and back on, that's fantastic. Look at the separation between our subject and our background there. I could even bump this all the way up to something like 71. That is fantastic. I'm really, really pleased with that. So if you wanted to go a little bit further with creating that separation, creating something where you are making the subject pop more, there are these two different ways to really make it happen in a big way, but a bit more of a natural and subtle way, right? So lighting and then depth of field. Both can be very, very useful. I tend to err towards the lighting side of things, just because it feels easier to manipulate in a natural and subtle way. But to be honest with you, this lens blur tool is so good. It's so powerful. It's very, very easy to apply this to a photo like this and be very, very pleased with the results. I'd love to know though, do you have any other tips that we haven't covered here on how you separate your subject from the background? If you need just a little bit, a bit of an extra pop. I'd love to know. Let me know down in the comments. That's always super interesting to me. It's always great to learn. We can all learn from each other. So let me know down there, of course, as well. If there's something you'd like to see in a future tutorial, let me know in the comments as well. I always want to make sure to make the stuff that you want to see. There's a full list of all the kit we used for these photos, for this video, for everything involved down in the description, so you can go and check that out for yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well, because there's new content all the time. I will see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.